What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my 2026 mock offseason series. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the Seattle Seahawks, obviously your most recent Super Bowl champions. This one's going to be a little bit more straightforward than the Packers and Bears episodes. Obviously, this roster is unbelievable. They have plenty of money to spend. So let's get right into it. So, like I said, your Super Bowl champion, Seattle Seahawks. Shout out to my brother and some of my friends who also support Seattle. Congratulations to you guys. It's awesome. Obviously, this team, there were high expectations going into the season, and they somehow exceeded them. Both offensively and especially defensively were just unbelievable. I think one of the more dominant Super Bowl teams we've seen, especially the past, decade or so. Like I said, they have plenty of money, but they also have a lot of free agents, so that will definitely be something to pay attention to. They don't have a plethora of draft picks. They've kind of traded some around for different players, so we're going to work with what we have. So we're going to start, looking at restructures, looking at internal free agency. There is only one cut I'm going to do, a little bit of a spoiler, and I think Seattle fans are going to be really happy about it from what I've heard. So let's just get right into our restructures. So as far as restructures go, there's a few that I think we can make. Obviously, this team's already in a really good cap situation with approximately $60 million in effective cap space before we do anything. They do have some big contracts that you can change around a little bit. Guys like Leonard Williams, Cooper Kupp, Sam Darnold, all critical pieces of this Super Bowl winning team that I think, especially in Leonard Williams and Cooper Kupp's case, like these guys are probably going to play out the rest of their careers in Seattle. I think each of them maybe have, a couple to a few more years in them. So if you move some of that money around, kind of move Sam Darnold's money around after his, pretty stellar performance, especially in the playoffs this year, you can get all the way up to almost $95 million in cap space for this team, which is pretty unprecedented considering they just won the Super Bowl, right? Usually with teams that are coming off of a Super Bowl, they have to make some harder decisions as far as their cap space goes. The Seahawks are definitely not one of them. So with $95 million to work with, let's get right into a cut and then internal free agency. So as far as cuts go, like I said, there's only going to be one, and it is Anthony Bradford. This is far less about this $3 million we're saving to get up to almost $100 million in cap space, and more about Anthony Bradford's performance. Obviously, the Seahawks O-line played a lot better this year compared to last year. They add Gray Zabel. You have a fully healthy Abraham Lucas. You got Jalen Brendel at center, who played pretty well, I think. But Anthony Bradford was really, in my opinion, the worst starter on the team. Full of a team that, has almost no weaknesses across both offense, defense, and special teams. He was definitely a sore spot. I'm trying to be as nice as I can. I know, especially my brother will have some choice words about Anthony Bradford and has had some choice words about Anthony Bradford. So to avoid that, to avoid the anger and frustration, we're just going to get rid of him. I think he's pretty easily replaceable, and you do save $3 million doing so. So that's the only cut we're going to do. And now we're moving into internal free agency with almost $100 million. So, like I said earlier in the video, this team does have quite a few impactful internal free agents. But like I said, with all this money they have, they can kind of pick and choose who they'd like to bring back. Kobe Bryant, obviously that starter at safety. He's projected to get about a $14 million a year contract. We'll kind of see. I think anywhere between 10 to 15 will make some sense. I wouldn't be surprised if he took a little bit less to stay with the Super Bowl champion. I know I would, so I wouldn't be super surprised. His conversion from coming out of Cincinnati as a CB and then obviously transitioning to safety and playing unbelievably well this year. I think he's a guy you definitely want to keep around, especially because he allows Nicky Manwari to keep playing that big nickel role, which I think is best for him. So definitely a guy we're going to try to bring back. Rashid Shaheed, obviously that mid-season addition. I think offensively, there were times that maybe Seattle fans wanted a little bit more out of Rashid Shaheed. I think a lot of his offensive production was just kind of being that, deep threat, which is fine, right? But he really shined at special teams, right? I can't remember if it must have been the regular season Rams game that Seattle won, and he has that huge kick return or punt return, whatever it was. He has a special teams touchdown, right? He definitely shined on special teams throughout his time as a Seahawk. He made some huge catches. So even though he wasn't particularly productive as far as counting stats go on offense, I think his impact was definitely felt. I'm I am a little bit concerned about how much he's going to get paid. I think some teams might offer him, quite the bag to come be their deep threat. But we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if, again, when you are the Super Bowl champion, guys want to play for you. So regardless of maybe, a lesser team comes and offers him more money, I would not be surprised if he took a little bit less to stay with Seattle. The other thing is that he's really a Clint Kubiak guy. And obviously now that Clint Kubiak has moved on to be the head coach of the Raiders, maybe that kind of changes Rashid's opinion, but we'll kind of see about that. Boye Mafe, if you saw my Green Bay Packers episode, I'm not going to have Boye Mafe returning. That's just kind of a spoiler for both episodes, right? I had Boye Mafe eventually signing with Green Bay. Again, I think this is not that Seattle can't afford him, but he's projected to get, $12 million a year. I think I gave him even more than that as a Packer. And just with how young and talented and deep this Seattle defense is, I just don't know if they're going to be able to muster up, hey, here's $15 million to come be our edge 3 or 4. So he's just a guy that I think they might get priced out of, which is fine. They have plenty of guys to replace him. Josh Jobe is another one. I know Seattle fans, at least the ones I've talked to, I don't know about how the whole general public feels, but a lot of Seattle fans really like Josh Jobe. I think they were very pleased with the way he played this year. Especially, kind of as that CB2 a lot of times with Tariq Woolen's performance being inconsistent. So we'll kind of see about that. He's definitely in line for a decent payday. Kenneth Walker, possibly the most interesting one. Obviously, your Super Bowl MVP went absolutely nuclear in the playoffs after Zach Charbonnet's injury. Most of the reports coming out I'm seeing are that he's going to be franchise tagged, which to me is kind of interesting, right? Because he's projected to get, $9 to about $11 million on the open market as a free agent. And that franchise tag is about $14 million per year. So for me, what that tells me is that for Seattle's front office and coaching staff, the Kenneth Walker decision is less about his ability and his performance and more about his health, right? Throughout his 4 years with Seattle so far, he's had some problems staying healthy and, consistently being available. So what that's telling me is that if they're going to tag him, they have all the belief in the world that he's, worth a top running back contract, but are not quite sure about his health or maybe want to see it one more time before they are committed to extending him over, 3 to 4 years. So we'll kind of take a look at that. Tariq Woolen, unfortunately, just seems to have kind of slowly declined since his rookie year. He was absolutely unbelievable as a rookie, obviously. A very special athlete at the cornerback position. He's like 6'3", 6'4", can run like the wind, right? But just too much inconsistency, in my opinion. I do think he's going to get an opportunity to get a pretty substantial contract and start for a different team. But I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't think he's going to come back. Again, Seattle has a lot of really talented DBs. I think he was the most frustrating of them this year. And with him, with his contract coming up, I'm not sure that they're going to look to extend him. I think they're going to try to replace him. Josh Jones was kind of that swing tackle, kind of a veteran there. That one kind of depends. We'll see. Drake Thomas is that restricted free agent. He's been an absolute, dream of an acquisition for Seattle. Obviously, he's been playing on a very, very cheap deal and has played just lights out. I know a lot of Seattle fans, especially like, kind of that old school downhill, hard hitting type linebacker, which I think is very, very valuable for a team like this with Mike Macdonald. So definitely a guy we're going to look at bringing back. Jake Bobo, who's almost more than anything seems to be like a culture guy, a real locker room guy. He's a pretty key contributor on special teams, not too much of like an offensive threat. But I think just what he means to the Seahawks organization and the locker room as a whole, I think as an RFA, he's going to be a guy they look to bring back. And then Ty Okada, another guy who played some very meaningful snaps this year at safety and played really, really well. He's an early rights free agent. So again, the Seahawks' ability to get these unbelievably talented players, especially on defense, for almost nothing is what largely contributes to a team like this winning the Super Bowl, right? You have Drake Thomas, Ty Okada, Boye Mafe, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, all these guys that I'm listing, none of them were first-round picks, right? None of them were first-round picks, and none of them required big trades, right? They were all just, drafted and developed by Seattle, which is super, super impressive, and the mold that really all teams want to follow, right? Getting those value picks across the board and developing them yourself. So obviously that's very, very impressive. The only hard part becomes, after you develop these guys, Now you got to kind of open the checkbook and hope they're going to stay. So let's take a look at who exactly is going to be coming back for Seattle. So as you can see here, I have 6 guys that I'm going to have coming back for Seattle, starting with Kobe Bryant, getting that 4-year, around $40 million deal. Again, it kind of depends. I think $10 million makes a lot of sense for him. I think some teams might give him more. I'm going to have him coming back to Seattle, trying to stay with a Super Bowl winning team. That'll be like a 4-year, $40 million, maybe 3 years worth of that guaranteed. So maybe call it, $30 to $32 million guaranteed. Rashid Shaheed I am going to have coming back. And I think a lot of people might disagree with this, and especially non-Seattle fans would say, well, no, he's going to get too much money elsewhere. I'll kind of believe it when I see it, right? We'll see if he gets $20 million somewhere, then he probably will go, right? If you bump this up to $60 million, that's pretty hard to say no to, regardless of where you're going. But for now, I'm going to have him staying in Seattle. They traded for him. Clearly, they really like him. So we're going to have him coming back on a 3-year deal, maybe with 2 of that guaranteed. Next, you have Kenneth Walker. Here, I'm just going with everything I've heard, right? If I was Seattle, I think he's earned a contract, especially with his playoff performance. He's a large contributor to a Super Bowl, which that in itself is enough to get a contract, in my opinion. But everything I'm hearing is that he's going to be tagged. Well, again, another, I'll believe it when I see it kind of thing. But I have him getting the franchise tag. The franchise tag for a running back in 2026 is going to be about $14 million yearly, or for just this year, I should say. So I'm going to have him playing under that franchise tag. Drake Thomas, I have at 3 years, $10 million. A guy that I think a lot of Seattle fans would be just fine paying even more than that. Next to Ernest Jones, I think he played super, super well. A guy you definitely want back, some of that homegrown talent. Jake Bobo, like I said, that real locker room, special teams, kind of Seattle culture fit. Just on a 1-year, $3 million deal. Who knows how much longer his career is going to last. Obviously, his role is just very specific. But I do think it's important to keep guys like that around. And then Ty Okada getting, an identical deal here to Drake Thomas as that early rights free agent, getting 3 years, $10 million as, 3 years, $10 million as an extension. The one guy that I left off this list that I'm really up in the air about is Josh Jobe. I think I'm pretty comfortable letting guys like Tariq Woolen walk. But Josh Jobe is a weird one. It just really depends on how much money he's going to ask for. Like if you're looking at, sub $7-8 million, then you probably will bring him back, right? The other thing is that in this draft, I think there's a lot of really good cornerback depth, specifically on day 2, so rounds 2 and 3. So I don't think it would be impossible to possibly replace him with maybe an even more or higher upside player. So I didn't have him coming back in this one. But if you told me that he came back on a 3-year, call it, $24, $21 million deal, something like that, I would definitely have no problem with it just because he played just fine this year. But for our purposes, we started with about $98 million. And after these re-signings, we're going to be looking at about $51 million heading into open free agency. So let's take a look at some of the new additions they might make. So as far as some new free agency additions are concerned with external free agency, I have 3 guys that I think would make a lot of sense for Seattle to bring in. The first one being Monteric Brown. He's a name that seems to fly under the radar a little bit. He was a pretty low draft pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars a few years ago, but he has played really, really well for them. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds, 26 years old. Just taking a look at his grades, you have a 75 coverage grade, a 73 overall grade this year. He played over 700 total snaps this year. I think a guy that, a Mike McDonald defense would really like. I think he brings some of that athletic upside, some of that man zone coverage fluidity. So I think he'd be a guy that makes a lot of sense to bring back. I think Jacksonville will be hard-pressed not to want to bring him back, especially after trading Tyson Campbell. Reports are also that Travis Hunter is probably going to play almost solely corner next year. So maybe that lets a guy like Monteric Brown leave the building. We'll kind of see, but I think if he is, if he does hit the open market, I think Seattle will be a team that would definitely be interested, kind of as that Josh Jobe / Tariq Woolen replacement. That's not to say that it just, is the only replacement you're going to make, but I think that's definitely a good start. I have him as a 3-year, $30 million deal with maybe 2 of that guaranteed. Again, this was definitely his best year of his career this past year, so you're not going to break the bank for him, but definitely at the very least a solid starter for an already really good secondary. The second guy I have is Isaac Seumalo, I believe how you pronounce it, Seumalo. He is a little bit older. He's 32 years old, but he's still so good, right? He had an almost 80 pass blocking grade this year, which was fourth for all eligible guards on PFF. Again, taking those numbers with a grain of salt. He is an incredible pass blocker, though. And with the cutting of Anthony Bradford, I think he'd be a perfect replacement next to Gray Zabel on the other side. Again, that's the kind of one area you're looking at on Seattle's team is like, okay, not very good at guard. I think bringing in a vet like Seumalo allows you to be a little bit more open-minded with your draft picks. I think a lot of Seattle fans are like, we need to get another O-lineman. But this kind of allows you to, broaden your horizons, not spend another first-round pick on an interior offensive lineman. He'll probably play out the rest of his career as a Seahawk, just based on his age and contract here. Again, I have him pretty much identical to Monteric Brown, getting that 3-year deal, maybe 2 of that guaranteed, call it $20 to $25 million guaranteed. I just think he does such a good job solidifying an already improving Seattle offensive line that it makes a lot of sense to bring him in at a relatively affordable price. And then the last guy, which is a little bit more interesting, is Arnold Ebiketie. He was obviously a member of the Atlanta Falcons last year. He's 27 years old. I want to say he was a second-round pick a few years back. And, to be honest, hasn't lived up to the hype that typical second-round picks, are expected. He only had 2 sacks this year and 24 solo tackles. So, his box score counting stats don't exactly blow you away. But he definitely had his highest graded and most, productive year as a pass rusher so far this past year. He had a 73 pass rushing grade and the highest pass rush win rate of his career. And on 3 years, $24 million, to me, this is kind of your Boye Mafe replacement. As that third or fourth edge rusher, Mike McDonald, almost more than anybody, loves to rotate those guys in and out constantly. I think he allows you to keep doing that. He's also a solid run defender, so, he could be an early down player, depending on, his development. But yeah, I think for a guy that, hasn't quite reached his ceiling yet, I think this would be an awesome opportunity for Ebiketie himself to continue developing under what I would consider a defensive mastermind in Mike McDonald. And then for the Seahawks to get another young, promising pass rusher on a cheaper deal than what you would have gotten with Boye Mafe. So those are the 3 guys that I think I'd bring in external free agency. And even after that, right, you bring in 3, $20+ million contracts overall, and you still have $23 million in cap space, which is just unbelievable. I mean, again, with that money, I think you could definitely convince me that Josh Jobe is the guy that would come back, or maybe even Boye Mafe comes back, right? Who knows? But for now, I have them getting bigger deals elsewhere, and we're going to roll with these 3 guys into next season. So before we get into a possible mock draft, see what the Seahawks can do come April, let's just do a quick review of the offensive and defensive depth charts. So starting with the offense, obviously basically no changes, right? You see Seumalo getting in at right guard there. He did play left guard last year. I'm less concerned with the transition between left and right. Number one, for guards, I think it's a little bit easier to do it at guard than it is at corner. Not corner, at tackle. And he's a vet. He's played a long time. He's shown that he's capable of doing different things along the offensive line. So I trust him to play that right guard spot. And then everybody else is the same, right? You have your quarterback of the future. You tagged K9. Obviously, JSN is, if not the best wide receiver in the league, a top 3 wide receiver in the league. Cooper Kupp, I think, especially as the year progressed, really picked things up, especially in the playoffs. Rashid Shaheed, we just talked about, we're going to bring him back. I still really, really like Torrey Horton, obviously a pick last year, I believe on day 3 out of Colorado State. He had his moments this year. I think, with another year or 2 of development, he could kind of take over that Cooper Kupp role. We'll see, right? It's a bit of a projection, but I like what we saw. Jake Boba comes back as that majority special teamer. Kind of the same thing with Ricky White III. A late round pick last year. Didn't play much on offense, but I think, you're still kind of betting on the upside. Obviously, AJ Barner, a top, 5 to 10 tight end in the league for sure. Maybe even higher, depending on who you ask. I love AJ Barner. And you have Elijah Arroyo behind them. Every time I look at this team's depth chart, it's just like, this is like the greed you talk about in the Bible, right? They just have so many talented dudes on such cheap deals that it's really hard not to think that they're going to be the favorite for the Super Bowl coming next year. Offensive line, the rest of them stay the same other than Sayamalo. I do have center as that kind of only spot of like, I don't want to say weakness, but maybe, possibly upgradable. I do think Jalen Sundell played pretty well this year. I don't think he's like a top half of the league center, but I think he's, around that average mark. So you definitely could upgrade on him, but he's making almost no money. He actually played with Gray Zabel before, which I found out after watching the Super Bowl, which is kind of cool. Obviously, a guy you could upgrade upon. I don't think you're like you're going to go take a center for sure in the first round because Jalen Sundell is terrible, right? He's just fine. But I think you can always get better there. Abraham Lucas, after being healthy, still a very good tackle. Charles Cross just got the huge payday. Chris Cross, as my brother likes to call him. He gets that bag. Good for him, right? He's played really, really well, and now he's a Super Bowl champion. So yeah, not a whole lot to talk about with the offense this year. It'll be interesting what they do with the absence of Clint Kubiak. I know I think it was the 49ers tight end coach came, and he's going to be a first-time play caller there. So he'll probably run that Shanahan system, which seems like everybody runs the Shanahan, McVay, tree system kind of thing. So we'll see how that goes. I still have high hopes for the offense as a whole heading into next year. And with that being said, let's just go ahead and take a look at this unbelievable defense. So very similar to the offense, the defense also doesn't really have many changes. This was one of the best defenses we've seen in quite a while. Maybe since that, Legion of Boom Seattle defense. Now you have the dark side defense. Obviously you add Arnold Ebiketie as that kind of rotational pass rusher. You still have guys like Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams, which is the best defensive tackle duo in the league. Even Riley Mills came in and got a sack in the Super Bowl. So you're at the very worst, 3.5, 4 like starting caliber players deep there. So you're just fine. Derek Hall, DeMarcus Lawrence still starting on the edge with Jared Ivey, who I really liked. He's a big, powerful dude. He came out of Ole Miss last year. I want to say he went undrafted, which was really, really surprising for me. I would have taken him somewhere early on day 3, but he's a big, heavy-handed, powerful dude. So I'm excited to see if maybe he can get an increased role this year. We'll see. You still have Uchenna Nwosu, Ernest Jones, Drake Thomas we re-signed, Tyrese Knight. Like, again, it is just insane how much talent and depth this team has. As a Bears fan, I'd love to get one of these stud linebackers on the Bears. It's just not going to happen. But man, if we could have this linebacker room, we'd be just fine. But fortunately for us, Seattle has all the good players, which is just, it is what it is. Looking at the defensive back room, you have Devon Witherspoon, one of the best young corners in the NFL. He's in line for a big payday in the next few years. Kobe Bryant, we just brought back. I think that's really important because it allows Nicky Manwari to stay in that nickel role. Julian Love and Ty Okada, you still have at safety. Julian Love's a guy that when he's healthy, he's very, very good. And in his absence, whenever he's hurt, Ty Okada can step in and definitely give you some, meaningful, productive snaps. Monteric Brown's that new signee we just brought in from Jacksonville. He's slated as that kind of CB2 role right now. I do have that as a quote-unquote weakness. I still think he's a more than capable starter, but definitely a place like, can't hurt to have more depth. You lose 2 guys in Job and Woolen, who played a significant amount of time last year. With both of those guys gone, it's definitely a position we're going to look at in the draft to, strengthen the depth back up to where it was. And then Nicky Manwari, who has already shown to be one of the most versatile and talented defenders in the NFL. He's going to stay in that nickel role and be a stud there. So, we don't have a whole lot of needs as far as really anywhere on the team goes. I know we highlighted center and corner. So we're going to go ahead and start the draft right away. They don't have, Seattle that is, doesn't have a whole lot of picks, but I think they have enough to shore up some depth concerns and maybe get some high-level contributors. So let's get right into it. So getting right into the mock draft here, we're going to do 4 rounds just like we did for Green Bay and Chicago. Obviously, Seattle's going to be picking in that 32 spot after winning the Super Bowl. So let's get right into it. We'll be working with 3 picks here. They still do have 3 top 100 picks, which is just fine. But as you can see, they only have 4 picks overall in the draft. I don't think you're too concerned with that considering how strong this roster is. So we're going to be making 3 picks here. Let's get right into it. Again, picking at that 32 spot. I think right away I'm going to go ahead and take a look at corner. That was a position we talked about maybe shoring up some depth. And I see some guys I really like here. Brandon Cisse, a very, very good athlete. Has prototypical size, 6'1", 190. He's, less than 21 years old. As you can see, his grades have been very consistent over the past 3 years for South Carolina. He's that former teammate of Nicky Manwari, which is pretty cool. Really, really high run defense grade, which I know Mike McDonald will love. A little bit higher in zone coverage than he was in man coverage this year. I think you can coach that up. So definitely a guy we'd look at. Colton Hood also, for Tennessee, stepped in for Jermon McCoy this year. Obviously, Jermon McCoy, possibly a top 15 pick, still recovering somehow from that torn ACL last offseason. But Colton Hood stepped into that CB1 role in the SEC and played really, really well. You see that 80 coverage grade. Not quite the run defender that Brandon Cisse is, but again, that prototypical size, 6 foot, 195, 21 years old. He tested really well at the combine. I'm recording this just after the combine. He was a guy that I think not answered some questions, but reassured people that he's plenty athlete enough to be an NFL level starter. And then Keith Abney, another guy. All these corners I really, really like. Keith Abney, obviously a very high coverage grade this year. He was very well rounded for an Arizona State team that I think maybe could have been a little bit better this year, but he was definitely a bright spot. Again, 6 foot, 190. It seems like all these guys are just clones. 21 years old. He also has a higher run defense grade, at least compared to Colton Hood. He's a guy I'd really like too. So definitely those three. For Seattle, I think I'm going to go with Brandon Cisse just because I think Mike McDonald is going to absolutely love that run defense. Obviously, they bring in a guy like Nicky Manwari, who's a stellar run defender. Devon Witherspoon on the outside is a stellar run defender. So, there's two trains of thought. Either you get a guy that fits that similar mode and just keep making a strength, or maybe you want something a little bit different, kind of a change of flavor like Tariq Woolen was. But Tariq Woolen didn't work out. So I'm going to go with Brandon Cisse because he fits the bill of the Mike McDonald corner. And, he'll be just fine as a CB2, CB3, opposite of Woolen. I keep saying Woolen, opposite of Witherspoon, excuse me. Now that I see a guy like Chris Johnson here at the end of the second round, this would have been another guy I'd definitely consider. Obviously, an unbelievable zone coverage grade this year. He's not quite the same player in man coverage as he is in zone. I think that kind of popped up at the Senior Bowl, too, if you see some of the tape from the Senior Bowl. And some of those one-on-ones, which I know are pretty much designed for the wide receivers to cook the DBs. And if you're a DB playing well in those drills, you're probably pretty dang good. He struggled a little bit in press man, but definitely athlete enough at the NFL level. He just had a really, really good combine. I don't think we're going to look to double up on corner here. Looking at the interior offensive line, there's a couple centers I really like here. Connor Lew, a guy who kind of surprisingly came out after tearing his ACL midseason. As you can see, he played 8 weeks for Auburn. He's a really, really good player. I think the fact that he declared after tearing his ACL tells us that he's getting some pretty good feedback from draft guys and from NFL teams. So definitely a guy I'd consider here. Jake Slaughter, another one who's just been really, really consistent over the past 3 years for the Florida Gators. Graded out really well this year. He's not like some type of like menace in the run game or unbelievable pass protector. I think he's just really solid kind of everywhere. I think he just doesn't really make mistakes, which is for me what I look for in the offensive line. Are you just going to do your job consistently? And I think he will. So definitely two guys there that I would consider. I'm going to take a quick look at running back. Just with K9 playing on that franchise tag, and obviously Zach Charbonnet probably going to miss a chunk of the year next year with that ACL injury. I'm not sure if that ever exactly got confirmed what the whole injury was, but I'm pretty positive it was just an ACL. So obviously, he can come back, but maybe not right away. Jadarian Price is a guy that's really, really good. He was a little smaller than I thought coming into the combine. I thought he was a little bit more of a beefy power back. I want to say he was right around 200 pounds, so, about 10 pounds lighter than he was listed. But he's got a lot of tread left on the tires, man, after, backing up Jeremiah Love for the past 3 years. He's a guy I would definitely consider. But with, kind of the information we have here, I think I am going to go with Connor Lew. I like that a lot because, we talked about maybe center being the quote-unquote weakest position on the offensive line. And with Connor Lew coming off injury, I think you can get another year of Jalen Sundell in. I think you trust him to be good enough. And then you give Connor Lew a whole additional season, not only to learn, NFL speed and scheme behind Sundell, but also to fully recover from that knee injury. So I really like that as, maybe for next year being a backup, but in the future maybe being your franchise center. And now we're kind of looking at, just kind of best player available, right? They have so many players on this team that are going to be contributors next year that I don't think they really have any needs that, in the third round, you're like, we have to fix this. I will look at running back again just because, as we talked about, you have a guy on a 1-year deal and then a guy that's injured. Emmett Johnson's really good. He's really, really shifty. He has some sweet feet. He can really make guys miss. He's not particularly special as an athlete, like as far as straight line speed goes, or strength goes. Like he doesn't have the greatest contact balance in the world. He's not like a 4.2 40 guy, but just a really good running back overall. I think, had a true breakout year this year for Nebraska. As you can see down here, over 1,400 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns, which is pretty unbelievable. He's definitely a guy I'll consider. Seth McGowan's another one, man, who just had a really, really strong combine, especially as far as some of those explosive measurements go. I know he had an absolutely insane broad and vert. He's a guy I don't know if we talked about him in one of the other episodes, but he's a guy that started as a true freshman for Oklahoma and then got into some legal trouble, like some pretty significant legal trouble. Ended up transferring down and playing JUCO, I want to say, for a year, and then gets back up to a program in the SEC like Kentucky and was very, very productive, right? You see 730 yards, 12 touchdowns, over 4 yards a pop. He's a really, really cool story. It seems like he's really turned a corner, which is awesome. He has prototypical size for an NFL running back and is incredibly explosive. So I think, kind of as that maybe K9 replacement, or at the very worst, in that Zach Charbonnet role as a backup, I think he's a guy I'd really like in the third round. Maybe you can take a look at like linebacker. I know we just signed Drake Thomas to an extension. You still have Tyrese Knight. Ernest Jones is under contract too. Kyle Lewis is a guy I really, really like. I know we've talked about him before. He's probably going to be more of a nickel in the NFL just because of his size, but his coverage ability, times his athleticism, profiles him to be a really, really impactful, especially pass coverage player in the NFL. So that would be kind of like fool's gold there. Like they're just embarrassment of riches for Seattle's defense. But after looking at our options, I think I am going to go with Seth McGowan, man. I really love the story. I really love the fact that he's, kind of turned his career around for the better after, some bumps in the road. And I think, I don't want to say a need, but I think he's one of the best players available as far as upside goes. And he's also, with K9 playing on the last year of the deal, could maybe be your franchise running back in the future, right? Well, you'll have to see how he progresses this year. How does he fit into your scheme, especially with a new offensive coordinator? But other than that, Connor Lew to be, hopefully your franchise center in the coming years, maybe sitting this year and then getting in and being a consistent starter. And then obviously Brandon Cisse, a guy who's a really, really good athlete, a really, really good run defender, to fit into that Mike McDonald defense opposite of Devon Witherspoon long term, I think makes all the sense in the world. And, overall, again, adding these three guys in to an already clearly Super Bowl caliber roster, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a team that is better equipped to reach and win the Super Bowl in 2027 than the Seattle Seahawks, right? I know the Rams are going to be a lot of people's favorites. I think with Mahomes coming back, obviously the Chiefs are never out of it. Maybe with new coaching, the Ravens are in it, but Seattle is just so dang talented and so dang good that I know they're my early pick to be next year's Super Bowl winner. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Do you guys think Seattle's going to repeat? Do you guys think I've done enough today to help them do that? I'd love to if you let me know in the comments. Otherwise, that's going to do it for me. We're going to get into a 49ers episode next, which I think will be really interesting with some of the injuries and contracts they have. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. I really appreciate you tuning in, and let me know what you think. See you later.